10 Cloverfield Lane came about when we got this spec script. It was like a Twilight Zone idea. And I think the great stories are great what-if stories. And I think if you said to someone, what if you found yourself trapped in a place and you were told it was really dangerous outside, but then you discovered it was really terrifying inside, what would you do? And that idea I thought was just an incredibly powerful idea, so we began developing that.
The movie opens with Michelle, played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead. She gets into a car accident and wakes up in this underground facility of sorts.
She is tethered to the wall by a chain and has this sort of horrible makeshift knee brace on and has no idea where she is or how she got there. And so as the movie goes on, it all kind of unfolds and you find out that there's this man there who's keeping her there and saying that it's for her own safety because there has been some sort of attack.
There's fallout and she can't leave for years, but she should be thankful because he saved her life. And we are not sure what to think of that, and things spiral out of control from there.
The idea was that this movie was such a tense premise. The entire experience was a little bit of an exercise in sort of pulling, you know, the bow back further and further and further and further. In the third act, we were finally letting, you know, the arrow fly. Because of the reference to Cloverfield, which is a fairly well-known monster movie, an alien story, we didn't want to present a monster movie the way you might expect. And so the fun of this was that for much of the film, the monster that you're dealing with might be someone human in the room with you. Dan Trachtenberg directed this film in a way that I don't think watching this movie you'd ever think this was his first movie. The way he collaborates with his actors, his crew, with us, he directs with a real confidence.
I think what was very unique about it was that it was so much in one character's point of view. We are with one character throughout the whole thing. We never get to see what another character sees without her perspective. And I really wanted people to feel what she is feeling.
When I was first reading the script, I honestly didn't know where it was going from sequence to sequence. There were moments where you're rooting for certain characters and moments where you don't like them and you're afraid of if they're a villain or if they're a hero. You really don't know. And I thought that was really unexpected and interesting and exciting.
Mary has been incredible to watch, and she's so expressive, and you know, there's so much going on behind her eyes, and she's so physical and fun to watch in these moments.
Mary plays this character with an amazing strength, even when she's terrified, even when she is perplexed as to what move to make. And the beauty of that is, I think along the way, the audience is with her every step.
You really see somebody going through this and reacting in a way that a normal person would. And a lot of these type of movies, I think we've seen kind of the cliche movie version of things, and I think Michelle is very level-headed and very human throughout the whole film.
The role is very quiet. The character actually doesn't speak that much in the movie, so her performance has to be so subtle, and she has to convey so much with just her body and her face and you know, what's going on inside her head.
The thing that was very important for us in looking at who to cast for Howard is that we didn't want him to feel mustache twirly. And someone who at first we might not trust and at first we might think is crazy, but as the story progresses we might think, maybe he's got a point, maybe we are the crazy ones. John Goodman does that so well. He is so convincing and can say things with such conviction to make you believe what he's saying, and then and the turn of a switch is terrifying and you have no idea what he is thinking.
To have an actor like John Goodman, who is so seemingly endlessly versatile, so funny, so likable, but playing a guy who is at turns perhaps the most unlikable person you'll know, the most frightening person you might know. To have John Goodman doing that elevates the role.
I've never played a character quite like this before. So close to my actual person. And yeah, so it's interesting. I don't have to do anything. Got a little loose wiring in his head, the character does, so he's overly concerned about being wiped out by forces unknown, and he obsesses with it, and he's a very careful man. We see him initially through Michelle's eyes, And it turns out that he actually ran Michelle off the road for whatever reason. He'd had another girl down here before who was no longer here. You don't know exactly what happened to her, but nothing good. And then it turns out that there are Martians out there. That's what we're calling. That's what I call them.
Emmett was another tough role, and I think that, you know, Michelle and Howard, we had a good sense of who those characters were from pretty early in the process. Emmett was always kind of in flux, and, you know, once we cast John, I feel like he's really become a singular, unique character, and Howard is the alpha in the bunker, so he has to kind of defer a little bit to him, and he's able to do that, not in a broad way at all, but in a way that really makes sense for the movies.
We also wanted him to bring some of the comic relief to the movie, and he's done an incredible job of that, sort of ad-libbing some things and just bringing his energy to the scenes, and just the look on his face in certain scenes kills me. He's so funny, and his reaction to things, and it's bringing a lot of life to our movie that, you know, just wasn't on the page, to have him be the guy saying those words and sitting in those scenes.
John Gallagher Jr., who is someone I loved in Short Term 12 and Newsroom, he makes it look so easy. But it takes, I think, an incredibly sharp actor to play a character like that and make him as authentic and likable as John does.
I really just related to the idea of somebody trying their darndest to keep up appearances and kind of keep a little bit of brightness and happiness in the face of kind of uncertainty and tragedy and the unknown of what really is going on. And I think he also feels a sense of wanting to make things easier for Mary's character, Michelle. I think sees that this is a very kind of overwhelming and intense environment, and John's character, Howard, is a very intense and overwhelming personality. And I think Emmett, my character, his role is to kind of disarm and comfort Mary's character to a certain extent. On such a personal kind of movie, really, it's rare that you get to do a project like this where it's really just 3 actors the whole time. You know, if you're gonna get stuck in a bunker with a couple people, then Mary Elizabeth Winstead and John Goodman, Dan Trachtenberg, our director, it's not a bad group, really.
When you have the idea of a bunker, there's a lot of preconceived things that come in. Bunkers are, by definition, pretty small spaces, particularly the way they build them nowadays. They're generally these 10-foot tubes, 50 feet long, and then they just stack tubes next to one another, so it's not very interesting. So I really kind of started from the idea of who is Howard, and when did he start this process, and what did he do as he developed it, and how long did it take him, and what was important to him. And it kind of came down to the idea that what was important to Howard was making something safe for his family. That's everything kind of springs from that idea. And I thought it gave an interesting opportunity to create a world that was going to be as much of a character as any of the characters written on the page. And this was a chance to really create something that had something to talk about.
Some of the designs, I should say, do come from really idiosyncratic people's structures that they've built. There's an image that we found early on of an old man in his bunker sitting, you know, on a rocking chair with carpeted floors and the curved wall. We definitely took inspiration from those interesting folk.
In general, it's basically all built out of wood. I mean, it's really just it's a wood set. And then to get the various textures, we've got great scenics, and so they take the plaster and they paint it to look like cement. So all of that's all those steps of that process. It's always great to see the stuff on paper become fully realized and dimensionalized. And it's funny because Jeff and I, the DP, have been talking, and I keep complimenting him on the lighting, because it's my sense that you can do whatever you want to do and put the most expensive, gorgeous set in the world in front of the camera, and then if it's not lit particularly well, it can look awful. And he has lit this beautifully.
We wanted different rooms to have different looks so that as an audience member you wouldn't get bored, the whole thing would look the same. And we wanted to build all the lighting in so that the actors would really be able to move freely through the space, and then it would also be as authentic as possible. We did talk about the characters and the different color palettes of the characters, where Michelle's room we wanted it to be warm, Howard's room is quite cold, And then we talked a lot about the main living space, and because there was so much action in that room, we really wanted to create two different looks there, the way that your body would kind of want to have sort of daylight, so we create this sort of fluorescent vibe during the day, and then at night he switches that off, and there's lots of warm practicals.
It's cool to come to a set every day and to have to cook up new ways of covering areas that we've looked at quite a bit. When you are confined to a box, it's more exciting because that confinement breeds creativity. We are shooting, for the most part, in order, in continuity, in sequence. So we're really going from the beginning of the movie through the end of the movie, and it's so special to be on this set and to just go from one room to the next in story order and have the momentum of what we did previously and what we've just shot, and bring that into the next sequence.
It's a cool place. It'd be a great fishing camp. Down here, we're shooting in New Orleans, Louisiana. There's a lot of fishing camps down here. And it'd be a cool place to hang out, but not to live here for 30 years or so.
My initial inspiration with the hazmat suit was more of a race suit, like how a race suit's built. You had to think, this girl's in a hurry. She's being chased, through this place, that she just would take the duct tape and go in like only 2 tapes to get out. We did prototypes my first week on with real shower curtain liners. It hangs on the body completely different. It did not form to her body as well as we had hoped. So then we went through a process of what material we would find that could be a fabric but also look like a shower curtain. And we finally picked a fabric, and it was good for me because it was breathable but it looked like plastic. So I thought, oh, the actress will be comfortable. Then the duck came into picture. And when the duck came into picture, it became even harder. So we had to bring in a specialty costumer, Doug Stewart, who is awesome. The design shows that she is using every piece. She's thinking logically. She is, a strategic thinker at this point.
Okay, you guys ready? Okay, 3, 2, 1. Basically what we're testing for is the ability to give the director options, right? Whatever his dreams are. It's Hollywood. Matt Kutcher, I'm the effects supervisor. Bob Dorman called and said he's got an interesting project. And there was no question, once I read the script, it was definitely something, that was out of the ordinary for sure. First thing you have to understand is what the director's vision is, and how important it is for him to see that phone move or to see the actress do her thing. And then the DP has to figure out how to get a camera in there and shoot it. So once we get through all of that, then we get a chance to go in and build it. So it's definitely a progression.
My approach for visual effects is to do as much in camera as possible. So basically anything that we can do practically, I believe we should. Try to make things as sort of seamless as possible for the audience and really limit blue screen and shots like that. Having said that, of course, there's always going to be blue screen, but as much as you can have an actor in a car that's tumbling and rolling, when it's safe, and have interactivity, that's always going to feel more real.
We started conceptually with how to achieve these shots even in early pre-production. And it evolves, it always evolves as the show goes on. I would say we probably solidified the Jetta maybe 3 weeks ago. We're using a massive Rotac bearing, which comes off excavators, basically. It's the same thing that spins an excavator. So we take it, instead of on the excavator, we flip it up. So whack the car in half, put the bearing on it, and drive it with hydraulics. And it works really good. It'll definitely be Mr. Toad's wild ride.
Basically what we're doing today is we're cutting apart this Volkswagen Jetta. We're gonna turn it into a big rotisserie. We're gonna take this car and make it flip 360 degrees. We're applying our own structure. We're adding steel and structure ourselves. We're gonna apply this and we're gonna turn it with a hydraulic motor. Should be just fine.
2.5 turns ending upside down. Light, Action. Okay.
I think one of the things we got known for building is more of like a Disneyland ride. When you put it in, you put it in your seatbelt, and you just go for a ride. And that's the same way the truck is going to work too. When the truck gets picked up and then dropped, it'll be on basically a Disneyland ride. Hydraulics control it front and rear, and air will control the pitch side to side. So we run a series of buttons and off they go. And the truck we solidified early on, we built a miniature model of it. And we took it to the production meeting and showed them what it would do. Everybody kind of wrapped their head around it, and it grew. You know, a storyboard is just a really cool artistic design of something that shows the point of view of what the director wants. But to get to that point of view, I think a lot of times if I build a model or a small maquette of it, you can imagine yourself inside the car and what you're going to see. It allows us to figure out how far down or how far up we could go and what are the pitch and rolls of this truck. And you could actually take and put a little camera behind it, you know, even your iPhone, and get it back in there and kind of take a look and see what it sees. And I'm sure on your video you get a chance to see the real thing work.
I am in awe of how real it looks. It's insane, it's incredible the things they can do.
One of the fun aspects of 10 Cloverfield Lane is that we developed the story in-house. We shot the film in New Orleans, but there's a kind of homespun quality to it. It's easy access because everything's sort of under one roof. It's closer to doing a student film or an independent film than it is doing a typical studio movie. Kelvin Optical is a department at Bad Robot. It is this sort of production arm that has not only been involved in production on a number of reshoots that we've done, but also oversees visual effects. There's a kind of pride, I think, that everyone here has when something comes together that was, you know, conceived, shot, edited, posted, all here in secret. And it allowed us to surprise audiences with the announcement of this movie.
I come from the trailer world, and ultimately you wish you were on set. You wish you could be there to have them give you an extra line, or to make something more concise, or to frame something a little bit differently, or to change a scene for you. Little did I know that Dan would be so attuned and aware and interested in my input at all times. While we were shooting, that was a big part of the job. Are we good? Do we have the footage we need for the scene to make it work? That was the big challenge with the schedule we had. You know, when I read the script, I was really excited by the idea of the ending. And actually cutting it was great. It was one of my favorite scenes in the movie. To actually sit at the keyboard and put together and figure out how to make it work. And that was really intense. And I had no idea what I was getting into. I had no idea what adventures lay ahead. You know, in this project, it was a long time before we have finished effects, or at least grayscale effects. We know it's coming. I gotta tell you, that was so rewarding, peeking into that world, the VFX world, to see those pieces come to life and come together.
I personally feel that visual effects need to push the story along, but they need to do it in a way that is non-destructive. In other words, if the visual effects are, you know, blatantly visible as being, hey, this is a visual effect, the chances of being bumped out of the film that you're watching it can be high. I strive, and I also, you know, have my team strive to not let that happen. This movie required a creature design that was nothing like we've ever seen before. The ship itself and the alien, they exist together, meaning the alien has this kind of hard-plated armor, and we wanted to kind of make it so the ship had that same kind of armor, this hexagon armor that basically is over the entire body of the alien. And we followed that same concept through the ship. So the ship and the alien all look like they could be manufactured organics. When we started to actually sit down and really start talking about the action sequence with Michelle and the creature as it jumps on the truck door as she's trying to escape from it, we really started to get into the semantics of how is she going to act knowing that there's nothing there. It was almost like choreographing a sequence that has a ghost that doesn't exist. So it can be very challenging, but because of the fact that Dan and Jeff Cutter were so open to, figuring ways out to make this, work, we were able to come up with a fantastic action sequence where there is no creature in the sequence. It was all added in post.
I tend to think of sound in texture, and shape. When we're looking at sound on a computer, we see a waveform, and it's an actual shape, and that shape kind of informs a texture. I'm always listening to the world around me because I so much rather hear an interesting sound in real life and use that than go to a sound library and pick a sound that, I know does a certain thing. One of my favorite things is using one thing for another thing. The creature makes vocalizations, screeches and screams, and some of those sounds are comprised of real animals that have been recorded, whales and dolphins and bats, as well as a sea lion, which has this great, powerful sort of breath. Can't forget about camels or lions. They have these guttural sounds. The creature has this worm-like appendage that comes out of its mouth. It's very stretchy and it's pulley and sticky. And so the first thing I thought of is packaging tape. So when you hear that by itself, clearly that's a tape dispenser. But then when it's mixed in and added with all these other elements, it becomes something much more. Whether you're editing sound effects or any creative, it's all about these choices, and you want to make as many choices as you can and then just keep moving forward.
What do you want the audience to feel? That is the only question that a film composer is trying to answer. I actually learned that from my mentor, Elmer Bernstein, who said it over and over and over again, that's the only question you ask a filmmaker. You don't ask them if they like strings, you don't ask them if they like clarinets, you don't ask them how fast it should be, you just ask them, what do you want the audience to feel? In speaking with Dan Trachtenberg and J.J. Abrams, we felt that the score needed to evoke a bigger cinematic style of storytelling. Rather than highlighting how small and contained the film is, we wanted the music to actually make you feel like you're watching one chapter in what could be a broader cinematic universe. The emotions are big, the tension is big, the music is aggressive and bold and narrative, and it's even mixed into the film with that in mind. I have two primary themes in the score, one for Michelle, our protagonist, and one for Howard, our antagonist. The two themes are interesting in that I think they are the opposite of what you might expect. Michelle is sort of an every woman. She seems at first like an average young woman who's put in an extraordinary circumstance. But her theme is very exotic. Her theme is played on a yaylı tambor, a Turkish string instrument. I did this because I wanted something that felt unusual, something that felt lyrical and vocal almost, but also sounded a little strange. Because ultimately, Michelle is not a normal young woman. She is very resourceful. She's very clever. She's smart. She does the things in this movie that we all would like to think we would do in her situation. Howard's theme also plays counter to what you would expect. Howard is very much an imposing presence on screen. He has a huge physicality to him. But his theme is played in the upper strings, glassy, cold, lifeless harmonics. Just the creepiest, quietest little sound.
I need to use your phone then to call my family and tell them that I'm safe here and make sure they're okay.
10 Cloverfield Lane is a film that I think defies genre. And because of that, I wanted the music to also stand apart. I didn't want the music to be obviously set in any particular style or genre. So because of that, I brought in some unusual sounds, sounds that I thought might play counter to audience expectations, and in some cases, sounds that were my lifelong dream to work with. I wanted something to represent the sound of the bunker itself, the sound of that space. I was inspired by the idea that it's underground, it's deep, it's buried. And I wanted something that could create a lot of bass frequencies. Then it hit me. Blaster beam. Okay, what is a blaster beam? A blaster beam is an experimental instrument. This thing is like a 15-foot-long pedal steel guitar from hell. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. Built in the 70s and refined by a performer named Craig Huxley. He was very generous with his time and energy. He brought me, my team, director Dan Trachtenberg, over to his home studio and gave us a crash course in blaster beam. I actually think that the blaster beam, while it doesn't play a melody that you can hum, it, to me, is the signature sound of 10 Cloverfield Lane. Despite having all these exotic colors at my disposal, I knew that the emotional core of the score would be an orchestra. But I didn't just bring in one orchestra, I brought in 4. That ranged from a full symphonic orchestra, 90 players, to a warm string orchestra, about 45 players, to a very experimental cello and bass orchestra, about 40 players, all the way down to 4 players. The 4 players are the Calder Quartet. These guys are arguably one of the most exciting quartets in the classical world right now. The music that I wrote for them in particular on 10 Cloverfield Lane is easily the most difficult music I've ever written in my life. I wrote them muscle ache inducing parts. And it was merciless because that's all they played. They played unison tremolo lines that I used to kind of burst through the orchestral texture. They didn't play a whole note in the entire score. I really wanted to use their sound, that tight, tremolo, agitated sound, to represent the thriller side of this score. It goes back to Bernard Herrmann's scores to Hitchcock films. It has a Hitchcockian Bernard Herrmann sound. And ultimately, I used all these different influences and jammed all these things together. And that really was the trick, is making all these disparate ideas fit.
It was amazing how many times in doing press for other projects, I would be asked about Cloverfield. You know, when's the sequel coming? Are you doing a sequel? What about Cloverfield 2? To do something like that again, it has to be a great reason for it. If a Cloverfield sequel wasn't a literal Cloverfield sequel, but rather an original story, and what if the thing that many people are bemoaning, which is, well, how come there aren't enough original stories now being made? We thought, well, this is actually a great opportunity to allow it to exist. There was a kind of DNA that felt like Cloverfield, though it wasn't the same characters, it wasn't the same monster, it wasn't a found footage movie. It's a way of doing a series of movies that all share a certain kind of connection and yet not feel like we are simply redoing, revamping, retooling, rebooting, but rather doing something original and hopefully frightening and entertaining.
I hope it's something unlike they've ever seen before. It's because that's why I did it in the first. What attracted me to it in the first place. It was different from anything I'd seen, and I got to grow a crappy beard. It's making me sneeze.
Also, have gotten from Dan and from the cast we're loving is a real sense of humor and some comedy, sometimes darker comedy, but some laughs in there and some warmer moments.
We love the sort of origin of this girl and the story of this woman sort of coming into her own through this crazy experience, and I hope that's the thing that people take away from it.
It sounds like a cliche thing to kind of say, but I really do believe it. It really is a ride. It really is like taking such a great ride, and that was the way that I felt reading it. And when you get that kind of adrenaline burst, and when you get that feeling like your heart's racing just from reading a script, you know that once you get it off the page, it's going to be even more exciting.
To get out in the world and see that Bad Robot ending, that third act switch, is just going to be fun.
This is a very unique movie in terms of its structure. Not a lot of movies have a finish the way we finish, and to spend all this time in this pressure cooker and then pull that release valve and explode the way that we do is a unique experience to movies and, in fact, most mediums.
So I hope when people see it, they kind of go back and go, okay, I need to watch that again.